and well met. Welcome to the pregame hangout here for the fourth episode of Villains Wanted. We left on something of a cliffhanger last time. I'm getting the sense that there might be a pattern there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens here. But first, we're just going to hang out. We're just going to vibe for a bit. Maybe talk about the game, talk about other stuff. I will set aside this outline that I'm working on right now. Okay. So, hey, and it's Jake,
The man
who
of the hour, or the
who
next
is
three
muted, but
hours.
he'll be here in a second.
Hello.
So, yeah, what you guys been up to besides
A
everything?
lot of work, a lot of work. But right now I am just testing out the Idle Champions code real quick, and
Mm,
then everything set to go. But I wanted to ask you
excellent.
guys, have you had a chance to see D&D Beyond is celebrating one of its great anniversaries? I think it's like its 50th anniversary for D&D, and
This
there
is
are a
the
lot of
50th
really
year of
interesting
D&D.
products.
Yeah, cool. No, I haven't really checked it out, but I will.
What are they doing? Do you
So
know?
yeah, they're doing like a lot of like cross-branded promotional stuff with like all sorts of other goods. So you could get like D&D sneakers, D&D Monopoly, uh
Yeah.
D&D waffle maker.
Cool.
Oh
Oh
man,
yeah, I saw the waffle maker.
I did
I
not know there was a waffle maker.
I did not either till I saw it. I mean, like
Yang and
whoever.
we had a discussion about whether we wanted to buy one for the dungeon scrawlers to take it on on like our retreats and stuff, which I totally think we should do. Hopefully not burning down Airbnbs that we stay in. But yeah, it is amazing. It puts out waffles that look like D20s. It's great.
Yep, we love waffles. We love D&D, and the dice and the waffle shows a whopping 20. So it seems like a critically delicious.
Awesome. Yeah, I gotta say, I clicked on D&D Beyond and was immediately distracted by this article called "Transcending Mortality: Playing a Lich in D&D."
Well.
Well. uh, that interesting moment when Nicholas no longer pretends to be a lich. Yeah, but like that's still several levels away, I'm sure.
I have so many thoughts about that I want to talk about, but I don't. I want to pause for a second before getting into like. I have two questions that are very D&D like mechanic related.
Uh-huh.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Well, all
I
right. The
love
first one is do you believe that there is a way to become a lich that is not through an evil based means?
Ooh, interesting. Um, I want to say yes, simply because things like the wish spell do exist. And I think that I'm sure there's some sort of deity who could actually bestow lichdom upon a character, um through like a bargain or something, and not
Yeah.
just through the normal process.
So I think the standard process of becoming a lich in 5e at least is inherently evil. Like you have to kill a number of people for the express purpose of of powering your soul battery with their souls, right? And completing the ritual and drinking poison and stuff, and it's all very, very dark and evil. But when magic is involved, anything is possible, right?
Yeah.
So, there could be a way. I think it's possible. I think it's possible.
But who wants to be a good lich?
Hmm.
Where's
I
the
mean,
fun in that?
yeah, that's an interesting question.
I Yeah, Rumpus is saying I think it's supposed to be evil, but for some reason want a good lich in your story. Why not? Which
Yeah,
agreed, right? Rumpus is like,
exactly.
why not? Right. I have many players who've played with me are all obsessed with being a lich. And why not, right? Lichdom is pretty cool. But they always like, I don't want to do the whole murder thing. And so then we have to start chatting like, okay, theoretically then, how do you pull this off? And it's been a ton of fun to kind of explore various options.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think like isn't part of the basic spell to become a lich, um, like it involves evil acts only because of the like deity or the realm that you're like aligning yourself with. So like couldn't you theoretically even just have the players discover like a new formula for lichdom that's more like neutral or even good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or align yourself with a deity of death or undeath who isn't evil. Like the Raven Queen, for instance, is not evil.
Right, yeah.
She could certainly seem evil, but that's just because death is scary.
I love the idea of a version of lichdom because lichdoms bind themselves so heavily to the notion of a phylactery or some method by which they can be defeated, right? And I've read back in 3.5 about salt liches, if you've heard of these, which were
Mm-hmm.
like the Egyptian liches. They're super rad, but they bind themselves to 7 phylacteries, kind of in the way that you get mummified, sort of that structure. And reading that, I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to see a lich. Let's say you're in a neutral alignment. It's a lich that was kind of bound itself to the notion of like magic items, let's say. And so it was kind of like almost Baldur's Gate 3 Gale style. Like I have to keep eating magic items to stay alive,
Mm.
which also incentivizes me to not to like make a magic item guild or like to keep funneling and funding my survival in some way, shape, or form. It's just fun to think about like ways that liches influence the world writ large because they gotta keep living.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of remind me of an adventure I once played with a friend's character, um, who had they wanted their backstory to be they made some sort of bargain with like a devil or some dark god where they would have to pay them like more and more money every time.
Yeah.
And the only way that they could do it eventually was by learning how to transmute like living matter into gold. And
Oh.
so they would have to then get more and more victims and turn them into gold and then deliver them to this dark patron. Um, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was like a much prettier, glitterier version of this. It just sort of reminded me of it. And then yeah, at the end of the whole thing, if they like paid the bill, they would get like immortality of like a different form. So it's like a different flavor of lich.
Yeah. Fun.
A good friend of mine was playing a kind of a mushroom druid, shall we say, like a spores druid, but like they were playing a reborn that was reanimated by fungus,
Mm.
and it immediately uh, led to thinking about mushroom liches and such, like dead people their consciousness is fused with these mycelium networks of mushrooms in this very Last of Us sort of way.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a neat idea too.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'd like to see
Other
just like for fun, like a beauty lich, like somebody is so good with their scare care regime and all that that they just like happen to live forever just through like how much they care for themselves.
that feels very like Dorian Gray, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
the obsession of your visage and it'd be fun to see ways to defeat major villains in ways that are not like hit point based. So let's say that skincare routine lich, right? Or that more like vanity based lich. The lich is immune to damage, but it can take only psychic damage by like vicious mockeries or ways of harming its self-esteem in some way. to like harm it to defeating it would be, I think, really fascinating
Yeah.
and maybe fun. We'll see.
I mean, yeah, totally. I think once upon a time we had like an immortal that was only anchored to like present day by like these time stones, and we couldn't kill them because their real body was in a different time, like phase, and so we had to just like destroy the stones. We had to destroy the stones in the correct order too, because theoretically, otherwise they would just they had to be destroyed in a certain order, or else they would just also come back. So that was kind of neat. It was like a race against time.
One of my briefly, and then I want to ask my other question, but one of my favorite things that I do, speaking of like stone, like alternative methods of fighting, right? One of my favorite kind of shticks to do to players at times, especially in like big final boss battles, is that the boss actively chooses to take critical hits. And it is very fun to eventually watch players start going, why is the boss trying to get defeated? Like, what is it in trying to pull? And then suddenly you see sort of almost this, after like a round or two, shift of the players going, let's stop attacking the boss.
Yeah.
Let's chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
My other question briefly, and this one I'm like, I posed it to a group of friends of mine when I was just watching a D&D clip on YouTube, and um I can't tell if it's like a thing, which is, can legendary resistances, which, right, you use them at the beginning of a spell with the saving throw being used on, let's say, you the monster, could it be fun for, let's say, Nikolaus to use polymorph, okay, on my dragon, and the dragon chooses to not legendary resist at the beginning, but can expend the resistance at any time afterward to just instantly break the polymorph. As a GM, sort of making the narrative decision to be like, I'm gonna let this effect play out for like 2 rounds, and then narratively the boss just goes, I resist it, I'm ending it now, right? Is that fun? I can't tell.
I think it would be interesting. And it would be a big surprise that could make a fight really, really dramatic and memorable. So yes, it could be fun. The key is that you just would need to frame it well and make it clear what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like the dragon has taken control of your spell, and you only realize that just before the dragon pops out of it, right? And you're like, oh no. Or you might realize that a couple of rounds before the dragon dispels the spell. And then you let the players go, wait, what does that mean? Does that mean the
Oh,
dragon's going to bounce it back on us? Does that mean the dragon can turn itself into something else? What does that mean? Right?
what a fun notion. Like, so not legendary resist isn't to end the spell, but maybe it's, what about if there was a mechanic that was like, you expend, let's say you have 3 legendary resistances, you expend 2 of them to just take the spell, like, as you said, to fully claim ownership over whatever effect has been applied to you, and you can then redirect or apply it as necessary yourself. That would be fascinating.
I really like the spell thief concept. I mean,
Mhm.
I wrote a character in my Realms novels who is basically a spell thief, that when magic is cast around her, she can either absorb the magic into herself, seize control of the magic, or it reminds her how to cast those spells, which she has forgotten, right? And her grimoire was always tattoos that would appear on her body, so she would read them in order to prepare
Oh, cool.
spells. So yeah, yet
Yeah.
another thing that I would write more about if Watsi were still doing novels, but it is what it is. That's Mirren, by the way. Anybody reading my Shadowbane novels, that's what I'm talking about.
Mirren,
And she
right.
shows up also in Westgate Irregulars on occasion.
Yeah. Quite often in the beginning.
quite often in the beginning, and then you kind of went off on your own a little bit. And when you came back, she was well, different.
Yeah. I guess I'll say that I think anything could be fun or not fun, just depending on like how much a character has like invested themselves in like their choice and their success.
Yeah.
Cause like if it's like a really high level spell slot that somebody used, and then it sort of like led to like a trap situation that led to that character taking like a bunch of damage or like paralyzing their fellow party member, like that doesn't feel great, and it's not something that um is like a oh my god, or I mean, some people may not enjoy it as like a ooh like surprise where it creates more like tension and suspense versus just feeling like they made a mistake or like a bad call, but it's not one that they would have ever expected or known. Not to say that like everybody, not to say that metagaming is the way, but there's just certain abilities that people don't expect, like the ability to redirect a spell or to be like a spell thief feels like something that you would give like a very specific type of monster, and not just like any legendary dragon or something.
Yeah, and it would need to be foreshadowed, and and set up, and they would have to find it interesting. You want to, and we all know this obviously, but for the benefit of anybody watching, you want to put things in your game that are going to interest your players, right? That are gonna keep them involved and keep them engaged. One of the tricks about making a memorable NPC is that you just kind of put in a bunch of NPCs and you just, pick the one that your PCs like the best, and that's the one who becomes the memorable recurring NPC, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is reactive as I see it. I think it's a real neat idea that you can seed into your game too. Um, but one of the golden rules of DMing always is don't violate your player's agency. Like if they feel like um, they're unable to make use of their abilities in a way that they had no idea was going to happen, right? Then they're going to feel just like antagonized. And some people are into that, sure. Okay, so this applies to, knowing your table. If you want to play that Gygaxian DM versus players sort of play style, that works for some tables, fewer tables as time goes on. But yeah, as long as you weave it in and they seem intrigued, and especially if this is a power that they can potentially learn themselves, right? Then seeing it in action will just be extra compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's so much possibility like in the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons, but like a lot of it has to do with um like I tend to think of combat as like a puzzle, but like the solution is damage,
Mm.
but like all your different abilities like attacks or spells or something are just different ways to deliver that damage in order to like solve this puzzle. And so um what you don't want, like when you're creating like a situation for players to figure out, you should definitely think of it in case of a like a puzzle, because there are definitely ways that will frustrate people. Some of the same practices with creating puzzles that frustrate people or are too like obtuse or like are too they feel cheap
Yeah.
would apply to combat situations as well. Like you want to present people with information, you do want it to be upfront and readable, you want to be like generous with that information. You don't want them to like do the equivalent of pixel hunt or like guess what the only true solution is to use your arcana skill on the left corner of the room, the northwest corner of the room, to spot the rune and decipher it, and then only if you know this one language can you learn like what is the weakness of the big bad boss or something. Like nobody really enjoys that. Like that's not fun, right? But
Yeah,
rather,
don't gate progress behind, unique specific things that players would not be able to know they needed.
A
yeah.
little part of me, when I was on a dating app at one point in time, wanted so bad for one of my opening descriptions to just write, "Don't gate narrative through a skill check," just to see if anyone would like
Nice,
it.
nice.
Because it's such a fundamental notion, but it's like that's very theoretical, like
Yeah.
RPG gaming. And uh I was too much of a coward to truly write that, because that's just so niche in some ways, but it I really wanted to do it.
I think that's one of the things that D&D players, tabletop players can learn from a game like Baldur's Gate 3. There are so many different ways you can accomplish the thing you need to accomplish. It doesn't have to be just one way that you can, get through the dungeon and defeat the bad guys, right? There are all sorts of different approaches that you could take, and it's always good to plan for that kind of thing in your games. Or if you are not planning for it, just be flexible and improv it. It tends to work out better, I think.
Yeah. And then also the other thing is like keep it brief, like shorter is better. People like just being presented with something that they could figure out and solve maybe in like 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds. If it just takes too long, it
You
doesn't.
start getting frustrated, and it just kind of cuts down on, yeah.
There's a fun trap design that I was reading about and kind of thinking about, which is right, designing particularly traps and puzzles, or puzzles with traps, right, where in RPGs there is no wrong, or there's no like solution. So it's whatever the solution is that the party develops over the course of their testing, and inevitably like you kind of call for them to say, okay, what is your solution? But there are wrong things that can trigger trap effects. So like, if for instance, if the party goes, well, we want to solve the solution with water, that by using water, that you can trigger negative effects for yourself. You're still going to solve the puzzle, but the trap, but that traps can be triggered based upon various elements or ideas that you include, and then you would have clues indicating what are things you should not include, right? So that way the party can just like create their answer, but that they're trying to figure out like, how do we not slip up too many times while creating our answers. And I've yet to test that, but I think it would be kind of fun to see if it works.
Yeah, to run to this point about Aaron's puzzle dungeon, I was more talking about like combat situations. I think exploration you could get away with like a lot, especially if like puzzles are within puzzles and the entire setting or dungeon is like a big puzzle. You get a lot of like room out of that. I think she was worried that like we would get sick of it after like an hour, but even after 2 sessions we're like, nope, this is great, this is fine. We're just happy to be here and just keep looking around, because there was always like more rooms and theories and things to test. But I think the amount of time that we spent there and like the amount that we ended up figuring with it felt good. It felt like there's enough there to keep it engaging.
I'm gonna switch topics for a second, and kind of back this
You
back
have
up to
one
something
minute,
that was,
let's go.
oh my god. All right. What was a book that scared you? We were talking about books
Oh,
earlier, and
interesting.
Eric, your books. I have only one book that I recall like reading, and at one point I was like, oh, I was very scared in the moment. And I'm not often scared of reading stuff, but it was Shirley Jackson's Haunting a Hill House, right? But I guess I'm curious, like, is there a book where the text, by the way that it was structured and laid out, could scare you? Like, and that you had a moment of fear. Has that happened for you?
I think that's happened with a couple of Stephen King books.
Yeah.
Partly because I mean, I dabble as a horror writer. So yes, this is definitely a possibility. And I know that and believe that, and I have to believe that that it's all about fostering the proper atmosphere and build up, right? Just like most things are in storytelling. So yeah, I would say so.
I think the only ones that scared me are the ones with the pictures, like those scary stories to tell in the dark. Oh my god.
So scary.
Yeah. So good, but so scary. So it is 6:25. Is there anything else that you want to say or add quickly before we go to break?
All good.
All right, we'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Don't go away.